Hey guys, welcome. My name's Bound to Divide, and over the next few hours I'm going to be taking you through every single parameter in Pigments so that by the end of this lesson you are an absolute genius with Pigments and you know exactly what you're doing and how to create any sound you want. Well, maybe not, but you should at least know what each parameter does and know your way around the synth. If you don't have a strong understanding of subtractive synthesis already, I suggest you should go out and learn that because I'm going to be talking about things like filters and envelopes and LFOs without explaining what exactly they are, because that's just a bit beyond the scope of this. The whole point of this is just to understand how this synth works. So if you don't have a basic understanding of subtractive synthesis, I'm going to leave a link at the bottom of the video in the description to a website called Centorial, and this is how I learned subtractive synthesis, and I recommend it to everybody. It is an affiliate link, so I do earn a commission, but I do stand by that software 100%, even if you don't use my affiliate link and you just go out and buy it without that link. I still think it's just the best way to learn synthesis. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to basically go through each parameter one by one, and I'm going to explain them in detail and what they do and how they work. So let's get started. Okay, so right at the top left here, you'll see next to the Pigments logo is this little burger menu. And if you click on that, you have the option for a new preset. So this is how you initialize the synth, basically. Click on that, and then you see we've got a nice plain preset that we can then start working with. And then the next one is Save Preset As. So that's going to bring up this window. And in here, you have the option to give it a name, an author, and you can save it in a bank. So by default, it'll save it to user bank. But if you wanted to create your own new user bank, if you wanted to create your own new bank, for example, if you're creating a preset pack, then you can just click in this box and you can also type in it. So I'll just say new bank for pack. There we go. And then we can also give it a type. So you can get really like detailed here with all the descriptions of your presets, so that later on it's super easy to filter down through your library and find any sound that you want based on, you know, all its characteristics and stuff. So I suggest filling this out as accurately as possible. So let's say this is a bass line, and we'll just add a comment like play in first octave or whatever. Just any comment that will help the user use the preset. And then we'll say it's an acid bass, comes from it's like a synthwave acid bass, if that's even a thing. And then characteristics, let's say it's analog sounding. Okay, then we can save the preset. Oh, we need to give it a name. So let's just say acid bass test, whatever. Okay, save it. And now that preset's been added to a new bank, and I'll show you how to find that in a bit. So let's just finish going through this menu. Okay, then the next option here is import. So this is how you'll import banks and presets that you buy and download. It'll just open up an Explorer and you can go and find it and then add it into the synth. Then the next up is export. So this is where you would export presets and banks. So if you wanted to then export your new bank for pack that we've just made, this is how you'd do it. Click on export and then that'll open up an Explorer again, and you can just save it like that. Okay, then resize windows, very self-explanatory. This is just how you resize the UI. I've got it at 120% now for the purpose of this tutorial. And then you've got this tutorials menu here, which will open up to the right here. And another way you can access that is just by clicking this little gear icon, which will also open up settings and your MIDI settings and the tutorials window. And this is just where you can find a bunch of, I guess, Arturia approved tutorials that cover all the different sections of the synth. Kind of like what I'm doing now, but I guess more broken up into different sections. And then next up is the help menu here, where you can access the user manual and then frequently asked questions. And then about just opens up this window where you can check your version and all of the other information about the synth. Okay, so that covers the... Next up is going to be this this preset explorer window. And it should open up initially on this explore page. And this is basically just where you'll see all of your different presets. And you can also search for presets. And what you'll notice is if you start typing here, let's say I just start typing chord, because I just want to find a chord preset. What'll happen is it'll pop up different filters. So here, say filter by style. And that's just because it's found a style that says chord, but it's also found presets named with the word chord in the name. So whatever you type, it'll search for anything really. If there's a style that matches that name, it'll bring up a style. If there's a designer, an author that matches the word chord, it would have said filter by designer. So for example, if I search Victor, it should give me an option to search by filter by designer, Victor Morello. So now I can search for all of his stuff. So it's really quite a nice search function in there, quite advanced. And then over here on the right, you'll see all the information about each preset. So it'll give you the name and basically everything that I filled out when we saved the preset. And you can also get a very basic view of what the preset looks like. So here you can see the different engines, the different waveforms that they're using, the utility. You can see filters. So here I can see there's a low pass filter and I can see it's got a bit of resonance on it. And if I play it, you can actually see the filter moving and the different engines, if they were modulated, you'd also see that waveform move around and stuff. Okay, then we have the store where you can search through the Arturia store and buy and download preset packs. I'm not sure if you can actually preview them in the synth. Let's see. Oh, that's pretty handy. Yeah, you can also preview some of them. Some of them are locked. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Being able to preview presets in a synth is something I've never seen before in any other synth. I love that. Okay, so then next up we have this next category here that says My Library. And you'll see there's recently played, so that's self-explanatory. Everything you've recently played in the synth will pop up in this menu. And then you have liked presets. Here you can see I've liked one preset. And how you do that is if you hover over any preset, this little heart pops up over here and you can click on that to like it. And then you'll see your liked preset pop up over here. Then we have saved presets. So anything that you've created and saved, or if you've modified a preset that you like and you saved it, it should pop up here in Save Presets. And then you have your banks, like we created a new bank, and here you can see this new bank. And then playlists. So you might be wondering what a playlist is, what the point of a playlist is. Well, you can think of a playlist kind of like a playlist in Rekordbox or any DJ software that you use. It's just an easy way to access a list of presets nice and quickly. So if I wanted to create, let's say I was a live performer and I wanted to perform with Pigments, and I wanted to just access like 5 different presets. Then I could just go in and find them. So let's just make a new playlist here, and we'll name this one Test 2. Okay, so now I want to add some presets to this playlist. I can just go to my Explore and just find some ones that I really like. For example, this one. Let's drag it down into Test 2. Let's add this one. And you can see it's adding it to the playlist. It's not removing it from this Explore page. So you're just basically creating a reference to the preset in this playlist. So you don't have to worry about dragging stuff around. It's not going to move it from one place to another. It's just going to copy it or reference it. So now we've got a bunch of presets that I like that I'm going to be using for my performance, and I can access them here in this playlist. So yeah, that's your playlist, and that pretty much covers everything that's, you know, interesting in this page. Let's go out of that, and then next up is this little window, and you'll see there's a little heart here. So this is another way to quickly like presets that you like and then add them to your liked page. So if I just go down here, I can go to a preset that I like geometric, and then I can like it, and it should pop up in liked section over here. Okay, then we have 3 buttons over here. First one is synth, and this is how you access the main panel of the synth, where you can go in and edit it and configure it and modulate it and everything. Then we've got an effects section, and this is where you'll be accessing all your sound effects, your EQ, reverb, delay. And then we've also got a sequencer. So an arpeggiator and a sequencer. So those are how you access these 3 buttons. And I'm going to dive into each one in detail, but I just kind of want to cover this entire bar just so you know what each one of these buttons do first. Okay, so the next button you'll see here is this little light bulb. It might already be yellow or it might be gray. And this is the sound design tips feature. And this is also something new that I've never seen in any other synth. And it's really handy. And so basically what it is it's a author-defined parameter. So when somebody's creating a preset, they might have certain tips for that preset. Like, let's say I want to say this filter, it sounds good if you use it at, I don't know, between 300 and 900 hertz. But if you move it much further than that, the preset's going to start sounding bad. And that's a tip that you would probably previously have defined like in the comments of your preset. But if you have like 10 different tips, there's often not enough space to write it, and it's like really, it's a lot of work to write all that information in. So a quick way to do this is to use this tips feature. So you'll see if I turn it on, a bunch of these parameters have these little light bulbs next to them. And they are defining the optimal amounts. So they're not actually doing anything. They're not physically changing the way the synth works or anything. It's just a guide. So you know that if I use this modulation amount, the designer intended for it to not go any further than that yellow line goes. But you can also edit these and add them yourself. So if you click on the drop-down arrow, you can click on Advanced Edit Tips, and that'll allow you to edit tips. So if I wanted to add a tip to this filter cutoff to say, hey, I don't want this to go higher than 1000 hertz or lower than 100 hertz, or at least I want to tell the user that it sounds best in that range, I can then go and hover over it and click on this little button while we make sure that Advanced Tips is enabled. And then I can drag this parameter up and down. So I'm just clicking on the yellow line and dragging to set the maximum value. And if I click on that line, if I right click on it, then I can set the minimum value. So now I can define my range that way. So now people know that if they drag to the left here, more or less to 100 hertz, or to the right, or I've set it a bit higher than I should, so let's just set it to 1000 so we know where it is. Now I can I can left click and drag that down. Now I've set my range, and I can lock it again by disabling this. So there we go. That's basically how you use the tips feature. Also, you'll notice if you hover over this tips, you'll get some information about the sound designer. You'll also get to see the comments Like here it says mod wheel controls the chords number of voices, so now we know that if we bring up the mod wheel, we'll get more voices. Okay, so yeah, that's a pretty handy feature. Then next to that, we've just got the output volume here. So we can just set that if it's peaking or clipping. You can turn it down. And then we've just got little volume meters over here for the left and the right. And then I've already explained this. This is just your settings. It lets you access the tutorials, all your MIDI configuration, which I'm not going to go into detail on because that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, if you have a MIDI controller, you can assign different buttons and knobs to different parameters in the synth using this window. It's also got a learn function here where I can just it's also got a learn function here where I can just choose a parameter, say pan, and then if I want to map it to something on my controller, I just manually turn it with my fingers and it will pick it up and assign it automatically as soon as you touch that control. Okay, so that covers everything at the top bar. Next up, we're going to start getting into these engines, what they do and how they work. And we're going to work through all of the different controls on this page one by one. Okay, so the next part we're going to be having a look at is your engines. Okay, so the way to think of engines is just basically a placeholder for a sound source. So you'll see if you click on this drop-down arrow here, you have different types of sound sources. You have analog, wavetable, sample, and harmonic. And I'm going to take you through all these different ones, but just think of it like a module. So you can either choose to have like an analog waveform or a wavetable synth. And this makes Pigments super flexible because you can convert it from basically an analog synthesizer into a wavetable synth, into a sampler, and then you can also use this Harmonic Engine, which allows you to sort of create your own waveforms. So the way to think of the synth is kind of like a combination of all these powerful other synthesizers out there. It's like taking Serum and Diva and I don't know, whatever sampler you can think of, and kind of just combining them all. I know Serum has a sampler in it technically, but yeah, it's super powerful to be able to then combine these two different engines, because you have two options and you can then go and combine a wavetable synth with an analog synth. There's just so many options. So yeah, let's jump into this analog engine and just go through all of the controls. So over on the left here, you'll see tune, this section called tune, and between each of the engines, this tune section will look slightly different. So just keep that in mind. If you switch from analog to wavetable, you'll see that drift button, that drift knob has disappeared. And then in the sample function, we have this filter. And in harmonic, we don't have anything there other than this Q. So yeah, just keep that in mind. So first up, we have coarse tune. So this is going to control the master tuning in semitones of this entire module over here. So if you wanted to control, let's say you wanted to pitch every single oscillator here up 12 semitones, you could go into each one and pitch them up individually like that, but that takes a long time. Instead, you could just pitch the master tuning up 12 over here, and then all of these oscillators would be pitched up 12 semitones. And then you also have the fine tuning, which is just, you should know what fine tuning is. Then we have this little keyboard here, which basically allows or tells the synth to pay attention to which key is being pressed on the keyboard and play the relative pitch of that key. So if this is turned off and I play the C, Oh, sorry, I've only got the noise oscillator turned on at the moment. Let me just turn up one of these oscillators. We hear C, and if I play this E over here, we still hear C. So the pitch is now just locked to C unless I go in and change the tuning over here. So if we enable that, then we can use it like a regular synth where we hear all the notes. Then underneath we've got this Q, which stands for quantize, and we can quantize basically the modulation of the pitch to certain keys. So let's say I wanted to tune this to C major. If you think of this like a keyboard, you've got all your white keys down here and your black keys up here. So if I wanted to make a C major scale, then I could just turn off these top ones. Now if I had to modulate the coarse tuning, it would ignore all of these pitches and just snap to the next available white note, essentially. And to just display that, I'm going to assign this LFO to the coarse tuning. Don't worry too much about how I do this right now, because we're going to cover modulation and how to do that later on. So yeah, let's just modulate this using this LFO. So without quantize, we'll hear all these pitches going up and down. So it's just sweeping through that pitch range. If I turn on quantize now, we're just going to hear the entire C major scale, as long as I'm pushing the C note on my keyboard. And it transposes them based on what key you use. So you'll see this first note is blacked out. And the reason for this is that this isn't actually your C major scale. It's only a C major scale because I'm pushing the C key. This black key just represents the root note of your scale, or the tonic. So if I play the E, it's going to play an E major scale now. What I'm basically telling this quantize to do is to just lock to the major scale. So yeah, you can just essentially define a key over here, and then it'll lock all your pitch tuning or your pitch modulation to whatever scale you have. And by default, it's chromatic, so all of them are enabled. So I'm just going to turn quantize off now. Oh, actually, let me just remove this mapping. Okay, then we have this drift key, and what drift does is it emulates like a synth that's kind of like uncalibrated and going out of tune on the different voices. So, for example, if we have one oscillator enabled and we turn this up, we don't hear anything because it's controlling the relationship of the pitch between the three oscillators. So if I enable this one, now we're hearing two voices. And if I turn up the drift, every time the key is re-triggered, you hear the tuning goes slightly differently. And this can, well, it says here under this little tip, if you look at the bottom here, it makes chords wider. But it can also make them sound pretty bad. So sometimes you're getting a chord that's tuned really nicely at this highest value, and sometimes they sound out. But anyway, if you're trying to make a synth sound that was like really vintage and kind of lo-fi, then you could use this, or just use it as a lower value to create something that's a bit more alive. So the higher you go, the more chaotic and out of tune it gets. Okay, so here you can see we've got this unison section over here, and it has different modes. You have the classic mode, which is just your basic unison function, so we can increase the number of voices here. And we can detune them. And we can use stereo to make them either wide or centered and mono. And then we have the chord mode here, and this basically takes the different voices and tunes them at whatever interval you choose. So at the moment it's set to octave, so I'm going to be hearing all these voices pitched at different octaves. But if I start adding, like, if I set this to 5, then we're hearing a 5th, and then I think that stands for major. Then we have a major 7th, major 9th. Oh, sorry, that first one was a minor. And here's your major. That's yeah, so you can just go through them and see all of them, different sus4 and whatever. So that's how you basically make chords inside the synth. And then we've got this super function. And that just basically sounds different to me. Sounds a bit more dramatic, I guess. Doesn't sound too far off from the other one. So yeah, just experiment with those and see which ones you like. Okay, let's go over into this section now. So you'll see under oscillator 1, you've got a sync button. And if you don't know what sync does, it basically hard syncs the other oscillators to oscillator 1. So if you had, let's say, oscillator 2 pitched up 3 semitones, what would happen is the waveform, because it's synced to oscillator 1, it wouldn't sound like it was 3 semitones higher. It would take the wave cycle and only repeat it every time this wave cycle repeats. So the pitch, it's playing at the same pitch, but it's going through more cycles before repeating. And if you pitch it down, then it kind of cuts the waveform shorter and repeats it like halfway through its cycle or whatever. Anyway, the whole point of sync is that it creates these like interesting timbres that can often sound kind of like metallic, but you can just experiment and see if you like it. So if we play these together, you can see I'm pitching this down, but because it's synced to the first oscillator, it doesn't sound like it's going down in pitch. Same thing if I pitch it up. It still sounds like it's tuned the same as the first one. It's now just creating these like interesting metallic timbres. So yeah, I really like sync. You can get some cool, interesting sounds out of that. And then the FM button just enables FM. And how you actually do FM over here is in this modulation section. So at the moment, it's set to oscillator 3 here in the source. And that means that if I turn up the amount, these are going to be FM'd by oscillator 3. So that sounds kind of strange. I'm not sure why it sounds like that. Oh, there we go. I think the fine tuning was making it strange. So yeah, there you can hear the FMing happening. If we change the pitch of this, we get a different type of FM. So that's how you do FM. And then you can also control what's FMing it. So at the moment it's set to oscillator 3. We can also set it to noise. And then we can get some really cool sounds. And then you can also change the type of noise that you want to choose. But I'll get back to that. So anyway, that's how you do FM. And you'll see each of these two have FM switches, so you can turn them on and off if you only want an FM 1 oscillator. And then you have this key button, which is the same as this key button. So if I turn this off, this won't follow the pitch that I'm choosing over here. It's just going to be locked to, the frequency is going to be locked, so it's not going to be changing pitch when I change keys. So most of the time you probably want that enabled, but you can get some interesting patches by turning this on and off. And then we've got coarse tuning and fine tuning. And you'll see the fine tuning has different modes. And so the difference between the modes is how it's being tuned. So if I set it to offset, you're basically fine tuning it based on hertz. And if I set it to relative, it's fine tuning it based on fractions of semitones. Okay, and then on this one, basically the same as that, except we don't have FM because this is our FM source. Okay, then over here we can select different waveforms, and that's pretty self-explanatory, the same on each one. And here you'll see this width function, that stands for pulse width. So you'll see some oscillators have it enabled and some don't. So the triangle wave, you can adjust the pulse width on that, and you can also adjust the pulse width on this pulse wave. And then we have volume controls for each oscillator, and we have this output section, so we can choose which filter. Here you can see there's 2 filters, and we can choose which filter each oscillator, or which filter all the oscillators are being routed to. You can also do a combination of the 2. So yeah, you can see it there in percentage amounts, how much of each oscillator is being routed, the sounds being routed to. Okay, and then we have output volume too. So this is the output basically straight from the engine into the filter. So you can actually kind of like drive the sound into the filter by setting the volume higher. This isn't the output volume of the sound once it's gone through all the effects and the filters. For that, you want to be using this volume control over here, master volume. Okay, and then we have the noise section. So I briefly touched on that when we were talking about FM, but here we can choose different types of noise. Just you don't know what red and blue noise is. Well, if you just listen to them, you can hear, if I turn this to the left, it's kind of like a low pass noise, just like a rumble. And sorry, let me just turn off these filters. So it's kind of like a darker noise with more sub in it. Then the white noise is pretty flat, and blue noise is like it's almost like it's been high passed. So it's taken all of the lows and mids out of it. So think of this almost like you've got your noise, and then this is like your filter, making it dark and bright. And then the modulation, I've gone over that. This is where we're basically choosing the modulation source, either oscillator or noise, and then the amount of modulation. Okay, so that covers the analog section. Next up, we're going to be having a look at Wavetable. Okay, so next up is the Wavetable Engine. Now, if you're familiar with Serum, you know what a wavetable is, but basically, if you're not, wavetables are essentially a collection of waveform cycles that you can morph between and create pretty interesting sounds with. So here we have, for example, a sine wave, a triangle wave, saw wave, and a pulse wave or square wave. And if I take this position knob and cycle between them and play a note, you can hear how it's morphing slowly between the wavetables. And you can do this with pretty much any sound source. So you could load in like a kick drum, and then it would create a wavetable out of that kick drum, and you can get super interesting sounds with that. But I'm not going to get too much into wavetable synthesis in this. This is more just about how Pigments does it. So looking at the engine module here of Wavetable, we've got the tune section, which is basically the same as the previous one. It just is missing the drift function over there. but we still have the quantize, and we still have unison. Everything else is the same. Okay, so up at the top here we have it says here basic waveforms, and that's basically the name of the wavetable. If we click on that, we can load in different wavetables. So here you can see we've got a different wavetable here. And there's a few different things we can do in this window. We can also import wavetables. So here, if we click on this folder, it'll import a folder of wavetables. So if you have a folder of wavetables that maybe you bought from a third party or something, you can import them through that button. You can also import single wavetables samples, but you can't do it if you have any of the Arturia wavetable banks selected over here. You'd have to go to imported or create a new folder and import that folder and then import the single folders into it. So basically, if you just use imported here, you can see I imported some random samples just while I was playing around and testing it out. So if you click on this, you can then go and find I've just got one of my sample packs here, and I just loaded in a bass brass stab or whatever it is. It's just a sample. And if I click OK now, you can see it's selected over there. And here you can see my wavetable is loaded up here, and we can hear it. So yeah, that's how you load in your own custom wavetables. And you can also delete wavetables by hitting this X over here. It won't delete the source file, so it'll still be there, so don't worry about it if you accidentally delete them. And you can also delete banks if you've loaded them in there. Okay, then you have these arrows, which just lets you cycle between them. And here we have this morph function. So if you turn that off, what it'll do, so the best way to illustrate this is with the basic waveforms table, because we've only got 4 waveforms here. So if I turn off morph and then I drag between each wave cycle, it's going to snap to each one. It's not going to morph slowly between them. And you may have noticed I've got this visualizer up here. If you want to know the name of it, it's called Minimeters by Direct. You can just Google it. I'm not an affiliate or anything, but people always ask what it's called, so I thought I'd save myself some time by telling you now. And I just enabled this basically just to show the oscilloscope, because we're going to get into some interesting things like phase distortion and wave folding, and it's easier to explain if you look at the oscilloscope. Anyway, back to this. So morph will allow you to cycle slowly or morph smoothly between each waveform. As opposed to having it off, it snaps. Cool. And then you have this 2D and 3D button. So that just gives you a 2D view of the waveform. As I morph between it, you'll see it changing, as opposed to looking at the 3D version. Okay, and yeah, just one thing to note, you don't have to use this to cycle through this wavetable. You can also click and just drag your mouse in this window, and it'll also let you morph between the wave cycles. All right, and then going over to the left here, we have a bunch of different modulators and distortion types. So the first one is FM, so frequency modulation. So this is how you do FM here. Basically just using the amount, this knob over here, you'll start hearing the FM. And at the moment I have noise selected, so that's why you're hearing this weird, crazy FMing. But you can also choose different waveforms. So here, let's just select sine wave so you can hear more classic FM sound. And you have 2 different modes here, so linear and exponential. So linear is more gentle, and the wavetable will sound in tune if you push it up just a little bit. But if you set to exponential, you'll hear it almost immediately goes out of tune. And you get this crazy FM if you use this exponential one. So probably most of the time you'll be using linear. Anyway, maybe not. Next up is phase mod. So phase modulation basically takes a source and will cause the phase of the wave to basically re-trigger based on that source. So at the moment it's set to key. So every time an incoming MIDI note comes in, the phase of the waveform will re-trigger. And so yeah, just play with these because you can get pretty cool effects with this phase mod. And then you can use an oscillator, the mod oscillator, to re-trigger it. And that's pretty cool. You can also use self, which uses, it's basically re-triggering based on the tuning of the wavetable. And then random, so that just happens randomly every time you play a new MIDI note. You can hear I'm hitting the same note, but each time it's slightly different because the phase is resetting and re-triggering in a random position. Okay, and then next up is phase distortion. So this is, I mean, I've never seen phase distortion before, so I had to read the manual about it. And I suggest you do the same because I'm not going to be able to repeat everything I've just read. But basically my understanding is that it takes your waveform, and then based on the target, it kind of morphs the waveform. And a good way to visualize it is using this oscilloscope. So I'm going to actually set the course down here, the tuning of this, down pretty low, like to 24. So we have this nice big wave cycle to look at. And then you'll see with the different models, as I increase the phase distortion, you'll see what happens to the waveform. So with skew, it almost starts becoming like a saw wave, and then it goes even further than that. But it has the effect of adding some pretty nice harmonics to this plain old sine wave. And if we morph this into more of a saw wave, you can get some really cool distortion. Let's try some other ones. So this is round, and I think this is more like square wave kind of shape. We have this triangle pulse one, and octave plus. So yeah, I guess it's not super important that you understand exactly how this is working, more just about experimenting when you're creating a preset and seeing which ones sound good and which ones don't in that specific scenario. And then we've got this fractalize. I think this is, they said it basically starts stacking copies of the waveform on top of each other and then morphing them based on that. So you can get pretty crazy with that one. Okay, and then we have wave folding, which is a pretty common type of distortion, and it basically folds the wave back over itself or back onto itself. But just to show you how it sounds. We have different shapes that we can choose too. So the first one is sine wave. Oh, so I think I may have misunderstood this. Let's just quickly check this out. Okay, so wavefolding is a pretty common type of distortion, and what traditionally is known as is you take the wavetable and basically fold it back on itself, and that creates some interesting harmonics. But where this differs is you have a kind of like a third-party waveform that folds back over onto the original one, and here we have different shapes, so we can use a sine wave, and this is how it sounds. You can have a triangle, which is pretty similar, and then this waveform, I don't know, I can't remember what it's called, but you can get some really cool, like gritty high end with that. And then all of these, you can modulate them using the modulator here. You can see this line kind of points to this modulator. Phase distortion doesn't do anything with that. So yeah, it can get pretty crazy with the wavetable oscillator. And then over here on the right, you got filter mix, which I've explained before. You got the wavetable position, which just lets you morph through the wavetable. And then volume, self-explanatory. And then the modulator, which we've already gone over. You have different modulator shapes and different tuning modes. So yeah, modulator is basically just another oscillator that's used for modulating different parameters. And the parameters that it's modulating, you can see through this line over here. Okay, cool. All right, so that's the wavetable section. So that's the wavetable engine. Next up is going to be the sample engine. All right, welcome to the next section, which is the sample engine. Okay, so this is basically just a sampler. You can load samples in and play them back, but there's many different things you can do to edit the samples, and we've also got a cool granular engine, which we'll get into. So yeah, let's get started. So up here at the top, first thing you'll notice here in the tune section is that it has a filter instead of on the other ones we had some other functions. I can't remember quite what they were. Yeah, we had the drift on the analog, and on wavetable we had nothing. Now we have this filter over here, which basically just works like almost like a filter you'd get on like a DJ controller. Drag it to the left, low passes the sample. To the right, it high passes it. Okay, and then over here we have the sample selector. So here we can choose samples, and we can actually audition them. If you make sure you update your pigments to 3.5, this little earphone icon will appear. And then if I click on different samples, it will play them back. It will audition them for me. And you can set the volume of the audition. And yeah, you can also load in your own samples using this import button. So it's basically just like, it's pretty much the same as the wavetable import sample selector that we've gone over before. There's nothing really super interesting about this view. You can also import folders. And then these buttons are just to switch between samples. And then over here on the right, we have three buttons, main, edit, and map. And we'll go through those one by one. But I just want to give you a little overview of this, what we're seeing over here. So under the main section, we're seeing a bunch of slots here. So we have 6 slots, and we can load up different samples into each slot. So here we can just click to add sample, and we can load in another one over here. Sorry, you have to double click samples to load them in. So now we have a cool little jungle sample over there. If we click on this one, it'll play this piano sample. If I click on this one, it plays the jungle one. And if you're wondering if we can play both samples at the same time, we can, and I'll get into that when we have a look at the map section, because that's where you do that. But let's just have a look at the granular section next, because that's in the main. So to turn on the granular engine, and I'm going to just use this sample here because it's a bit more interesting. If we turn on the granular engine, we can basically play back the sample in really interesting ways and create really cool sounds, especially with like pads and stuff. So now you'll see if I play this, we have basically little copies of each sample being repeated back to us. And the way that that gets repeated is controlled by our start times and the direction, pitch, all these different buttons here, knobs here. So let's go over them. So first of all, on here we have a direction knob, and this is basically controls whether the granule samples get played forwards or backwards or a combination. So here we can see if we drag it this way, we start getting some forward and some back 50% of the time pretty much. These are all reversed. Okay, then the density here basically it adds randomness to the rate. So here's basically the rate at which new samples are added using this density hertz. So here you can see we're getting one new sample every 1 hertz, and that increases. Then we can add some randomness to it, which is pretty cool. And then we can also add some random pitching to it. And we can actually control that, because like let's say you were using this piano sample, which is a bit more tonal, and you wanted to add some random pitching, but you want it to be a bit more musical than that, because that's kind of just sounds out of key. You can quantize it using this quantizer over here. Let's say we only wanted to do fifths, then we would have to leave that one on, which is 7 semitones higher. Now if I play it, now we have something a bit more musical. We could also set it to maybe just octaves, so just leaving all of them switched off. And we can also change this pitch dispersion. So at the moment you'll hear you're getting those lower octaves in, and they sound a bit muddy. So maybe we want just the higher octaves. So we just switch this to higher. Now we're getting some just octaves in there. All right, so I'm just going to turn this pitch off. And then we have the start control, and that basically will randomly tell the grains to start in different positions from the start point. And the start point is controlled over here. And we can also control the dispersion. So if we want the start point to be before, I think we have to bring the start over here. Okay, so now you're seeing all of them are starting before the line. If we switch this to after, all of them are starting after the line, and then both, we're getting a combination of them. Then we can control the shape of the envelope. So at the moment it's quite a smooth sound because it's a triangle, so the sound's fading in and out. But if we set this to the left, it's more of a saw. It's more like stuttered. To the right, it's more like a sweep. And you can choose a bunch of different shapes over there too. Okay, then you have the size, and that basically sets the duration of each of the samples. So if I set this super long, each little grain lasts 600 milliseconds. Super short, and you can hear the effect there. And then there we go, we can add some randomness to that too. Some are short, some are long. And then we have some more controls here. So width would create a offset between the left and right randomly. So you get this wide image. Set it all the way to the left. It's all very mono and centered. And then we can also add randomness to the volume of each grain. So yeah, you can, just by playing with these, you can start getting super interesting sounds. Probably get a bit more interesting with this. If we had to like maybe set this in the center. Maybe bring up the time. The width. Some randomness to the start here. Now it's really starting to get something quite interesting as opposed to just playing the sample back like this. So yeah, this granular engine is super powerful and fun to play with. And then we have this edit tab over here, and this basically just lets us edit the sample. So for example, we can trim the sample if we wanted to only play back a certain section of it. So here are the trimmers. So this is the start trimmer and this is the end trimmer. So if I only wanted to play, let's say, the section with this transient in it and nothing else, we can zero in on that. And then on the left here, we can tune the sample. So if you're working with the piano note, for example, it says that the note is in C3. And let me just set the start to the beginning here. And I'm just going to turn off the granular engine for now. Let's say the piano, the original sample when we imported it was actually at E. Then we could go to the root note and set it to E. And that just tells the synth to basically transpose the note from E down to essentially C if we're playing the note C. So it's a fast way to tune it. If you know what key the sample's in, then you just set it over here. Then you don't have to play with the transpose to actually tune it to the keyboard. I'm just going to set that back to C3. I don't know if I can type. Oh, there we go. And then obviously you can transpose it or fine tune it if you want, if it's like slightly out of tune. Transpose is also useful if you want to change the octave. And then you have playback here. So this basically controls the way the sample is played. Are we playing it as a single sample? Do we want to loop it? How do we want to loop it? And all of that. So let's go through that. So here at the moment, it's set to normal. We can reverse it. So the sample reverses all the way from this point. And if we set the start, or the end of it over here, we can start getting some kind of cool reversed effects. And we can also loop it. So once we enable loop, we will hear that the sample starts to loop. It's reversed, so now we're going to hear it looping backwards. And it also has this release button over here. And what that means is it just tells the loop to continue looping as long as the release stage of the envelope is going. So if we just have a look at the envelope, this VCA envelope, if we increase the release, all I'm going to do is quickly tap a button on my keyboard. And now you can hear it continues to loop through that release section. I'll make it even longer so you can hear it more clearly. So it keeps looping until the release is complete. If I turn that off, even if I set the release super long, it just plays it once through and doesn't loop it again. Okay, so the loop mode, we can also do forward or back and forth. So if we wanted to play back and forth, we can. It's just going to go back and forward. And you'll notice that looping it that way is not very smooth. So we can use this crossfade, this loop fade, to crossfade it. But that won't work unless we set the loop length shorter than our start and end length. So if I set this a bit longer, you'll see these little buttons here, these little triangles appear when you enable loop. You can set the start over here and maybe the end a bit shorter. And now you'll see that crossfade starts to appear. Now we have a really smooth loop. Okay, and then next up is the mix. So we can control the gain of the sample. So when we're playing multiple samples, this is pretty useful because sometimes you might want to have, like, I don't know, this one being a lot quieter than this one. Maybe this would be the main sample. You want it to be louder. You can also pan them left and right and make like a really big stereo image. And then you can use this button here to copy samples. So you can copy to another slot here. We have 6 slots. And then you can also reset the state of the sample. So like all the different start points and stuff get reset to the default. And you can also remove the sample from the slot over here. I've already gone over the start function over here. So that just sets where the note starts from. You can see all the grains are starting from there now. Volume and modulator, as far as I can tell, modulator doesn't really affect much in the sample section. Oh, one thing I didn't go over was the snap here. So what snap does is if you have a sample that has a portion of it, let's say the end of it, where there's a 0 amplitude, so it's completely silent, then with snap turned on, these start and end points will snap to these 0 points so that you can easily find sections where there are 0 crossings, and snapping to them can just help remove pops and clicks. Okay, so that covers main and edit. And now we have maps. So if you're wondering how to get 2 samples to play back or more at the same time, this is how you do it. So there's multiple mappings. At the moment it's set to single. So only the selected one will play back. And I want to just go back and enable the granular control here, because it's a lot more fun to play with multiple samples with the grain function. Okay, yeah. Let's have a look at this. So the next one is key map, and basically what this does is it maps each sample over certain octaves. So here you can see we have 6 octaves on our keyboard, and in octave 0 we'll be playing sample A, and in octave C1 through to C5 we're playing octave B. And we can control that by dragging them around here. So if I drag this into slot C, we'll see the first 2 octaves on our keyboard are mapped to A, and then from C2 up to C5 are C. And it's kind of hard for me to show that. Actually, I can open up the keyboard here. So I don't think this... I'm not sure why it's not working. Should be playing this one back at octave 0. Let's try, maybe my keyboard wasn't set down low enough. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so this this keyboard doesn't go down to octave 0, but I've just set my MIDI keyboard to down an octave, and now when I'm playing this bottom note, you can see it's playing that A sample back very deep, and as soon as I switch up to the next octave, it starts playing the B sample. Okay, so for key and velocity mapping, it could be a little bit confusing, but basically this layout tells you what it does. So we can map our different samples to a range of 3 octaves. So at the moment, you'll see the range is set from C2 to C4. And we can switch through that, cycle it up to C3 to C5 or whatever. Okay, so at the moment it's C2, C3, and C4. And these samples A, B, and C are mapped to C2, C3, and C4. So if I play a note C2, it's playing A. C3, we play B, and then C4, it's playing C. But if what I did there is I played it at a very low velocity. If I play it at high velocity on C2, it's going to play this D sample. So you'll see the samples are stacked on top of each other. If I play C2 on a low velocity, it plays the A sample. If I slam it, we play the D. C3, low, slam it, E, and so on. So that's how key and velocity mapping work. Oh, and you can also set the threshold of the velocity using this slider over here. Okay, so the sample picker here is basically just a knob, and it lets you select all the different samples. Get distributed equally over the range. So if I had 5 samples, they would be distributed equally over this range. And you can also modulate this, so you can kind of like sweep between them with an LFO or something. Then we have this round robin function, and it'll basically switch between each of these samples as you're playing. So each time I hit a MIDI key, it'll choose the next sample, and this is great for like things like drums and stuff where you want to have each hit slightly different. Then you could load in all those different hits and cycle between them just using pigments. But another thing to note with the round robin sampling is that if we have the granular engine enabled, round robin's going to start picking different samples for different grains. So now you can see each one of these samples is getting grains played back at the same time. And that's really cool, because now you can get really interesting sounds with this. And then random will just play the samples in a random order. If we turn off granular engine, if I just play the same key over and over again, it's just choosing random samples. But if you have granular enabled, it's going to play them in a random order for each grain. Okay, so yeah, that's a really fun little module we have over here. That's pretty much everything, I think, for the sample engine. So next up we have the Harmonic Engine. Okay, so now let's have a look at this harmonic section, this Harmonic Engine. So basically what this is just additive synthesis. And if you don't know what additive synthesis is, I suggest reading up about it maybe before watching this, otherwise you might get a bit lost. But to give you a brief rundown on additive synthesis, with subtractive synthesis we typically have a waveform, more complex waveform like a saw wave typically, or something like that. And then the process of shaping it is done through removing harmonics, through filtering, and just shaping it using, envelopes and shapes and, envelopes and LFOs and stuff. So it's more like how a sculptor would work. You start off with a big block of clay and you chip away at it until you have the shape or the sound that you want. Where with this harmonic engine, it's more additive synthesis, where you're typically starting with just a sine wave, and then you are building partials or harmonics on top of it. So any sound can be broken up into basically two parts, where you've got a fundamental frequency, so like the bottom most loudest frequency, and then on top of that there's a bunch of harmonics. And so with additive synthesis here we can illustrate this. If we just bring down this partials means harmonics, just another word for it, down to 1 and play it, we just hear a sine wave. You can see the sine wave over here. And then we can begin adding partials on top of it. And sorry, there's a filter on. Let's just turn the filter off. Until you eventually have a saw wave. And then we'll be using a whole bunch of other functions here to essentially build out a sound that or whatever sound you want. So yeah, let me just take you through all the controls. So we've already just briefly touched on partials, and I think this is probably the best place to start here. This partials means harmonics, I've already said that. And you can have a maximum number defined here of partials. So if you click on this drop down arrow, you can set it to like a maximum of 8. And you can see all the partials here. It's quite nice because it's quite visual. So if I have this turned all the way to the right, it's going to have a maximum number of 8 harmonics or partials on top of it. And we can go up to 512, which is basically like a full saw wave. Okay, and then you've got this volume control, which controls the volume of the partials. It's not really displayed here, doesn't really reflect. But you can hear, you can turn them down and up. Okay, and then just going back to the top here, you've got the smooth button here. And what this does, it'll basically just smooth the movement. Like if you're modulating partials and changing stuff with this filter here, you'll hear that it can be quite jumpy and almost like quantized, but this will just smooth the movements. So if you're making a sound and it sounds kind of like jittery and jumpy, you want to just smooth it out. That's the button you want. Okay, and then in this little box over here, you see you've got this window drop-down arrow. This is your partial modulation mode, and there's different ways basically you can start to shape the sound and modulate it and create interesting sounds that you pretty much would not be able to make with subtractive synthesis. So the first one is called window, and basically how this works is you can see this knob is linked here to this modulator, and so it's basically doing FM. But what we can do is we can use the position and the window size to zero in on a certain portion of the harmonics and FM only those. So if you only wanted to FM the high end of your sound, you can do that, which is really cool because you can't really do that with traditional FM in subtractive synthesis. So let's just test that out. I've got this saw wave, and what I'm going to do is just pitch it down so that we kind of covering the full frequency spectrum here. I'm going to pitch it down 24 semitones. Okay, and now if I start to FM it, we're getting that typical FM sound that you would hear, but we can then change the position. And you'll see that's our window that we're working with. And let's say I only wanted to FM one little harmonic over there. I can do that. And start getting really interesting sounds. And you can increase the window size. Let's just try everything the very top end. You can hear it's making sounds that otherwise you would never hear in traditional subtractive synthesis. So I love this Harmonic Engine. I've been playing around with it all morning and been making some really interesting sounds. Then you can control the gain of the window. So if we wanted to just turn up this section that we've just modulated, we can. And it also kind of works almost like an EQ. So if you just wanted to turn up some harmonics without FMing it, you still can do that. So I can just turn up the gain on those specific ones. Yeah, pretty fun. Okay, and cluster, how it works is it basically pulls partials within a given window closer together. So let's just visualize that and see how it sounds. So here we can change the position. Oh, sorry. Here we have to increase the density first of all. And you can see it's pulling those first two partials closer together. And it sounds pretty nasty, but you can play with the position and the clusters, you can start getting really cool sound. So let's move this position up. And I'm going to bring down the number of partials. And then what I want to do is kind of just bring the top few partials closer together. Let's go even further down, and we can make almost like a respace. Because what will happen is, as the partials get closer together, they'll start phasing with each other. And that's typically how you make a respace. You have two waveforms, and then you kind of detune them slightly. And because they're a little bit out of tune, they go in and out of phase, and it makes that kind of like, what do you call it, pulsating kind of effect. But the problem with like a traditional respace is that it does it with the entire sound, including the fundamental. So usually you'll have to split it up and make a separate sub bass, so that sub bass isn't phasing, and then high pass the respace, so that you have like basically your mid bass, which is the respace, and then your clean sub bass. Anyway, we can create a bass like that, where we have the fundamental untouched and just the partials on top of it are phasing, and then creating this really cool and stable respace. Let's do that. So if we set this to a maximum of 8 partials, and we just turn it down so that we are only getting the first 2, then we can take this partial position until we get only the second one. I think we actually need to get the top 2. There we go. And now you can see as I turn the density up, it'll pull that partial closer together. And now you've got a really cool respace. And as you can see, if you have a look at the spectrogram, the bottom node or the fundamental isn't phasing at all. Completely stable. So I thought that was a really cool discovery. So yeah, the cluster mode is really cool. And then we got this shepherd function, which is basically a shepherd tone is almost like an effect where it sounds like something is permanently going up in pitch. I think it's like a psychoacoustic effect. And how they achieve it with this is basically the partials move slowly up or down depending on what you do with this knob. So let's play our sound and we'll just increase those partials again so we can see it. We can change the position here, the window size. Let's just do it with the top ones over here. Let's increase the size. And then you'll see if I drag this down, it starts shifting them or shifting them up. And you can also increase the gain. And so what it says in the manual is to achieve that shepherd tone effect, you need to create an LFO with more of like a ramp shape. So you can, I think you can adjust the symmetry of this and play with this until you get, yeah, there we go. Now we're getting more of a ramp shape. Let's bring the phase up. And then bring it down really slow. And now we should be able to map that to the gain. So if we just click on the LFO 1, and we can map it here to this. And I think they said you should bring this up to around 5. And then we want it to be unipolar. Or wait, let's leave it bipolar. Bring it all the way up to 5. There we go. So now it should slowly pitch up. Yeah, now we have basically a sound that sounds like it's continuously pitching up, even though the fundamentals staying the same. The partials are slowly moving up. So that's pretty neat. Okay, then here we have the ratio, and basically this is just, if you think about it as like the way the partials are calculated. So how it works is you have the fundamental, and then the partials are just multiples of that fundamental. So it's all just maths, and you can change the ratio of that and get some pretty interesting harmonics going. Let's just increase the wait, why am I filtering this now? Let's just go back to window here. Oh, it's because I've got a limit of 8 over there. Okay, so yeah, to just illustrate this. That you can see exactly what it's doing. So it's just basically shifting all of them up based on whatever you set this ratio to, and then just double click it to set it back to 1 to get your more classic harmonic series. And if you bring it down, you can start getting really weird. So stuff like that, where you have this like undertone series almost happening. So yeah, you can play with that and get some really weird stuff. Then under the ratio, you've got amount, and amount is basically just a modulation parameter. And at the moment it's set to a modulator. Here you can see a sine wave, so it's just going to be doing FM. I'm going to just bring this back down to -24. And there you can hear the FMing. Okay, and just on that note, I might as well go over the modulator here. I'm not sure if I explained this before on the other engines, but on modulator you can do cross mod. So you can cross modulate between 2 different engines. So for example, if I set this to engine 2, and then engine 2 is set to analog, if I play a key now, you'll hear both of them, but I can turn down this and just use it as a modulator. And then when I can start FMing to that modulator. Let's actually let's bring down the partials so that we can hear the FM, because we're going to be FMing to a saw wave, so that should start adding harmonics back. Let's turn up this FM amount here, and then we can start FMing it. There you can hear it. And then you can control like different parameters on Engine too, like noise. We can turn up the noise, and then start FMing to noise. So yeah, that's just this modulation section. Okay, and then we have this shape here and parity. So if you have a look at parity, it says 50% odd and 50% even. So if I just turn this back up here, we can see our saw wave. Let me just reset all of these, like this shepherd tone and cluster. Just want to reset all of these. And that, there we go. Now we got our saw wave back. So at the moment we've got 50% odd and 50% even partials, and that basically is what forms the saw wave sound. We can drag this to the right and start getting more even harmonics. That sounds like that, or we can go and just get odd harmonics, which is basically what makes a square wave. And you can blend them into each other. I think the even harmonic sounds pretty weird. But yeah, you can get interesting sounds like that, interesting shapes. Okay, so this tilt section, if you think of like a fade in any DAW, like, you know, if you drag in a kick drum sample and you just fade the edges, that's basically how I think of tilt, but only the top end of it gets faded. So let's just play with this and see. Yeah, you can increase the amount of tilt. So yeah, I guess it's not really like that because you can also kind of make things louder with it on the top end. So if I turn this up, basically the high end of the series gets louder, and this tilt offset basically sets the position where that tilt starts. So if I turn this up, we're going to start losing the fundamentals. And if I turn it down, bring this offset down, it's going to start kind of fading out the top end. And then you can see that fade that I was talking about. I guess it's almost behaving like a type of a filter over here. Okay, and then this section is called the spectrum section. But the way it behaves is kind of just like a complex filter. Like if you use Serum, you'll see comb filters and reverb filters and all these weird types of filters. And this is just a way to shape the sound and get something interesting. And you have two options here. We have a spectrum A and a spectrum B. And this morph knob over here allows you to blend them and morph between them. So let's just play this saw wave that we've created here, and we can increase the depth of this one, and now you can hear how it's filtering it, it's carving out certain frequencies, and we can morph between the two different shapes that we've selected, and you can start getting like interesting vowel-y sounds by doing this morphing over here. And remember I spoke about smooth. If you have smooth turned off, it'll start sounding a bit not smooth. So you might want to turn that on. And so yeah, basically you have a bunch of comb filters. I guess this is like a resonance comb filter or something. I'm not sure. You can check out the manual to read more in depth about each one of these, I think. But I would just kind of cycle through them and see which ones sound cool. And then you can use this section to control which part of this spectrum you're using. So you can see the highlighted bit in blue is the only part of the spectrum we're using now for the filtering. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, then imaging is basically just stereo imaging, and you can start doing interesting stuff with this. You can pan certain partials left and right to kind of create a nice wide stereo field. So the first one is called split mode. And split mode lets you pan the odd or the even partials left and right. So if I want to pan all the odd ones left and the even ones right, that creates a nice wide stereo image. It's kind of weird to hear this. Not what I'm used to hearing, but you can get interesting effects with it. And then we have another one called random, and that one basically randomly pans stuff left and right based on the rate. And then we have this periodic one. Okay, and periodic just basically creates clusters, or takes clusters, just groups of partials, and pans them left and right. So let's just test this out. Oops. So there you can see certain clusters are being moved left and right. And we can increase this. And look at that crazy shape that's happening here. So yeah, you can get some really weird and cool stereo effects with these imaging modes. Okay, and then everything else is pretty much the same. The tuning and the output section, same as all the other engines. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the Harmonic Engine. Next up, we're going to be having a look at the Utility Engine. Okay, let's check out the Utility Engine. So if you're familiar with Serum, you can kind of think of the Utility Engine as two noise oscillators combined with a sub-oscillator. So, and if you're not, don't worry, I'm going to explain everything. So here's our first noise oscillator, essentially. And this just lets us load in essentially like a sampled sound. So here we have white noise. And you can go in and you can find different things like textures, atmospheres, hardware. I guess this is just different kind of like noises that come from hardware, like a tape wheel. Pretty cool. You can get like transients, so you could take like a kick or whatever, cymbals, little zaps. So it's super handy for like crafting sounds in interesting ways, because now you can layer in like a kick drum as the transient if you feel like the transient in your sound isn't strong enough, for example. So I love working with these. So let's just have a look at some of the... I'm just going to load up a random sound here, like a Celeste. Here we go. Let's have a look at some of the parameters. I'm just going to turn this up. Okay, so this is just the phase retrigger. So every time I hit my key, every time there's a MIDI note, the phase of the sample will start again from the beginning. And if you set it to random, each time it'll play from a different random position in this waveform. So you'll notice it becomes pretty inconsistent. So most of the time you probably want to have it re-triggering, unless you're trying to make something that's a bit more unpredictable. And then we have length, which just controls the length of the sample. So if I really shorten this, barely hearing anything. Oh, and sorry, I didn't include this loop. So this will just loop it. So if I hold down my key, you hear that looping. Sounds a bit like a jackhammer. And then we have this key tracking. So if I turn this on and I play different notes, it's kind of pitching it up and down, so you can play it like an instrument. Leave this off. If I play different notes, they all play back at the same pitch. Then you can control the pitch too here with this tune. And it's got a little quick filter over here if you want to low pass it or high pass it. And then this is just the routing. So if you want to send it through a filter, you can send it through either filter 1 or filter 2. And then just some volume control. And then noise 2 is identical to noise 1. It's just there for the reason that you can now combine two sounds. Okay, and then lastly here we have this oscillator, which is essentially, well, what they call it is a virtual analog oscillator. And so we just have a bunch of basic waveforms here. And it's by default set to -12, so I guess the purpose of it was to just act as like a sub-oscillator. But you can change the pitch using this knob over here, and then it's also got a pulse width knob over here too. And then it also has the basic quantize feature, so you can quantize the pitch of it to certain intervals. And we've got some fine tuning, and then same filter mix and the filter volume here. So the output volume of, oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, so we can choose the filter over here, or we can choose where we want to route it to. So at the moment it's, this is the volume, but it's being routed to the filters. We can also skip the filtering and go straight to the FX buses, or just directly out to the master. So this is handy if you want to have your sub untouched by any filters or effects, you can send it straight out to the master. Okay, so that's the utility engine. Next up, we're going to be getting into the filters. Okay, so let's have a look at the filter section now. You'll see we have two filters, and you can use either one of them by routing to them using this output section, filter 1 or filter 1 or filter 2. But you don't have to use both of them. Now, they're basically just identical filters, so we're just going to focus on this one filter for now. So at the top, this is where you choose your filter. So you'll see there's a bunch of filter types, and we're going to go through all of these types. So the first one is multi-mode, and this is like the Pigments proprietary filter. You won't find it anywhere else. And all it is basically just multiple types of basic shapes or basic filters that you'll find here. So you get low pass filters with different slopes on them. So going from 6 dB to up to 36. Same thing with the high pass filter. Then we get a band pass filter and a notch filter. And this is where you would configure modulation. So it says here filter 1 FM source, but it's not super accurate of a description, if you ask me, because you're not really doing FM if you're using an envelope to modulate the filter. It's kind of just, yeah, it's more like, yeah, it's just filter modulation. I'll call it filter modulation because that makes more sense to me. So this is like where you would control the cutoff filter using an envelope, for example. So if I wanted to use envelope 2 here, we could modulate this over here. Let's bring it down. And we need to send it to filter 1. And now you can hear that filter working. Just be aware, I'm surprised that it isn't animated, but yeah, this filter, you won't see the filter sweeping up and down and doing whatever you are doing with modulation. It'll only move if you move the knobs physically. Okay, so yeah, that's this filter. It's also got a resonance, but no drive or anything. Next is this low pass gate, and a low pass gate is like a combination between an amplifier and a filter at the same time. So if you bring, basically what it is if you bring this level down all the way to here, not only is it filtering out all of the harmonics, it's essentially turning down the volume too. So you can think about it like a VCA / a filter. And you can configure that over here actually. So you can have it working as an amplifier. Now you'll hear it's just basically turning the volume up and down. Or you can have it as a low pass filter, where it's filtering it, or both. And now you can see the level and the filter goes up and down. And it also has this little time feature over here. There's Vactral time. Vactral is like some little chip thingy, and it's unique to this low pass gate from my understanding. But basically the way it behaves is the filter will open almost immediately, but the way it closes, it gets dictated by this time. So if you have a really fast envelope on here, this is the only way I could really hear it, is if I bring down this decay like really short, and let's bring up the envelope amount. Now you will notice that with this fast one you can barely hear anything. Just make it a bit longer. A little more of the sound comes through. Slow. Now you're hearing a bit more of a longer decay. So yeah, it's subtle, but it is there. It is happening. And then we've just got volume and pan. Pretty self-explanatory. Next up is the surgeon. I guess it's called surgeon because it's got a super steep curve. I think it's a 64 dB curve. And it has different modes. So you can have like a low pass, high pass, notch, and band pass. Yeah. So it's a really steep filter, so if you want to get surgical, then you use the surgeon. And the spread control is only for the band pass, as far as I know. Yeah, I think so. So it won't be enabled unless you're using band pass. And you can modulate the cutoff here using whatever envelope or LFO you want, just by clicking this plus here. So if we use an LFO. Okay, and then there's nothing else really interesting about that. SEM, that comes from an analog filter. It's modeled off an analog filter. And it's basically just a low pass filter. It's got some resonance. It's got this FM source, which is basically like just filter modulation. Oh, I guess FM maybe stands for filter modulation. I was reading it as frequency modulation, so maybe that description is accurate. My bad. And then we've got resonance and we've got mode. So here there's like morphs between a low, high pass and a notch. So yeah, you can have all of those options and a band pass, or you can kind of just blend a mixture of them and get some cool filtering happening. And next we have this Matrix 12. Everybody knows the Matrix 12. It's a really famous synth. And this is the low pass filter modeled off of that. And it's got some modes. Yeah, you also have a phase filter, band pass, low pass with 2 different steepness curves, high pass and notch. It's also got resonance, modulation, and that's it. Then we have the Mini, which is based off the ladder filter from the Moog. And what's cool about this one is it includes filter drive, which none of the other ones have. So if you're looking for filter drive, this is the filter you want to be using. Let's see if I can just remove this. Yeah, so that's the Moog filter if you're looking for it. Then we got the Jupiter 8 filter. And this has just got 2 modes, 12 and 24 dB and resonance. And you can also modulate the cutoff. Then we have a comb filter. If you've never heard a comb filter, it's can be pretty chaotic, but you can get some really interesting sounds out of it. And it basically, from my understanding or from reading the manual, it adds a delayed version of the sound to itself, which has the effect of essentially boosting and cutting certain harmonics, but like very drastically. It can actually become quite tonal, and so sometimes when you're using this, you actually have to tune the filter. Like you have to listen to it in context and make sure that it doesn't sound out of key. And then you can change the modes here. It's got like a feedback mode. Pretty crazy. Feed forward, which just looks like it's been flipped. And then these are the modes: low pass 6, band pass 6, and high pass 6. It's got damping, which is basically just like taking out the high frequencies. And all pass. So it's got keyboard tracking. And with a comb filter, you usually do want to use keyboard tracking because it's so tonal. So if you tune it to a certain frequency and then you play another note afterwards, it'll generally sound out of tune if you don't have keyboard tracking. Oh, maybe not in this case, but in my experience, when using it in Serum, you usually want to use keyboard tracking. Yeah, and that's everything with the comb filter. Then we've got a phase filter. And you won't really notice this unless you use it in conjunction with an LFO. So if we take this LFO and just assign it to the cutoff here, it starts sounding like a phaser. And if you turn up the poles, it'll sound even more like a phaser. Okay. And let's see what else. There's nothing else on that one. And we've also got a formant filter. And here we can control the frequency, and this is how you get your vowel shapes. And you can morph between different vowel sounds using this morph. And then you've got this Q factor, which basically is just resonance. And the blend blends between the original sound and the filter. Cool. So that's all the filters. Now you get some filter routing, and so you have the option to route it in, excuse me, in serial or parallel. So in serial, you'll have filter one's output going into filter 2's input, and then this filter 2 will be affecting filter 1. And then if you set it this direction, they run in parallel, which means that they both independently go out to the effects or to the master. So yeah, if you don't want filter 2 to affect filter 1, then you'll want to be using it like this. And then you also have the split mode, which gives you a few other routing options. So here you can send filter 1 to FXA and filter 2 to FXB, or you can send filter 1 to FXB and filter 2 to FXA. So it just switches them around. And then we have an amp mod, and this is super handy. By default, it's mapped to velocity, so all you need to do is turn this up. And now, if I play the sound on my keyboard and I do a low velocity, it'll be very quiet. So now it's velocity sensitive, which is great because most synths setting this up takes a few clicks, and this one's just right there and you just need to turn this up. It has a bunch of other options too, so if you have an expression pedal, you can use that. Aftertouch, you can use mod wheel. There's just a whole bunch of different options over there. Then we have voice panning. This is just going to pan the synth left or right. And then we have the send level. So when we get into the effects, you'll see that we have a send, and we can control the send level here too. But basically, if I turn this up, we'll hear the send reverb. Okay, so that's it for the filtering, and basically we are done now with the synth side of things. Next, we're going to be having a look at the FX section. Okay, so next up is the FX panel. So if you just click on this button here, you get to the effects. And over on the left is basically, we have two sections. We have an insert section and an auxiliary section. And the difference between these is inserts are basically like loading effects onto a channel if you're working in your DAW. And the aux is like a send. So auxiliary basically is making a copy of the sound and then affecting that copy. Insert is directly affecting the original signal. And you'll see under insert it says A to B. So this is just the routing. So at the moment we have two inserts, and the way it's routed is insert A goes through this chain, and then it goes through insert B's chain, and then it goes out to the master. But we can change that. So we can have B going into A. So now B comes first and then A. Or we can do parallel. So A goes straight out to the master and B goes straight out to the master. And then we have auxiliary, and here we have the send and return. So send is the amount of signal from the original sound that's coming into the auxiliary section. You can also control it here with the send level. So if I play this now, you can see on our aux, you can see all the effects by clicking on these different tabs. Here on the aux tab, we have a reverb. So when I turn the send up, I start to hear the reverb. And I can control the volume of the aux or the return by moving this up and down. Okay, and then these little boxes is how you control the order of your effects. So let's just turn off our auxiliary. We're going to now just look at our insert FXA. Okay, so I've just set this back to A into B. So now we're just looking at the insert A. And just to describe what this is doing is we can drag these up and down and switch the order. So at the moment we've got a delay and a reverb. We have to turn up the dry wet to hear them. But let's say for some reason we want the reverb to become before the delay. Now we can switch those around. And sorry, I didn't mention this before, but you can control the volume of bus A and bus B, or the effects chain A and effects chain B by using these controls. And then FXB is, you can see here the routing actually shows you this little line, which is pretty handy. But so now you can see it's going through FXB, but FXB has nothing on it. And then it goes straight to the output. Okay, so both of these are identical, so there's no point in me going through both of them. I'm just going to go through the effects now so you can see what's possible. Here you can click on the None button if you don't want anything in this panel over here. And we can only do 3 effects per chain, but it's fine because you've actually got 6 because you can route these into each other. And 6 is plenty. You can get pretty crazy with that. And then another option here is you can copy effects. So if you click copy effects, you can copy your effects to another bus or to the auxiliary channel. And then we have a whole bunch of effects. So they're all categorized. So we have time-based stuff, which is delay and reverb. And so we have a basic and simple delay over here, which has all the normal features you'd see. It has ping pong, it has time syncing versus dotted or in hertz or milliseconds, sorry. You can fine-tune the timing of it. It's got a feedback, stereo width, so we can make it mono or wide. We can high pass it or low pass it, or both. Okay, and then the next delay is this pitch delay. So if you want to delay that pitches up, you can use this pitch shift over here. So now you'll hear the delays pitch up over time. So we make them a bit quicker and give it a bit of feedback. You can start getting fun results. It's also got stereo offset, so you can offset the right and left and make it wider. It's got stereo detune. You can also change the way it shifts, so you can have it doing octaves. Or octave down. Pretty interesting. Or just normal. And then it's also got a high pass and a low pass. It's also got the spray feature, and you might have seen this in the grain delay in Ableton. It can get pretty messy, but I think it basically splits the delay up into little grains and spreads them out over time. And yeah, that's basically this delay, pitch delay. Then we've got a tape echo, which I guess is more of like an analog kind of delay. And it's got this input volume, so you can drive, you can kind of saturate the delay. I guess when that light goes red, that means the delay's coming in a bit hot and clipping, which can be desirable. And then same thing here, this is where you set up the delay time. You can fine tune that time. And then intensity is basically just feedback. And then we got stereo spreading. And then the reverb is a really simple reverb. We can adjust the room size, pre-delay, decay. We can dampen it to take out that high end. We can make it wide or mono. And then adjust the input and the output. Okay, and then we have distortion. So here we have basically just a bunch of different distortion models. I'm not going to go through every single model here, but basically how I use distortion is just try out all the different ones on whatever sound you're working on. Sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. But they've got all the stuff that you would see in pretty much most other distortion units. Okay, so next up is Bit Crusher. I'm sure you've heard Bit Crushers before. But yeah, so it's a Bit Crusher / downsampler. And then we have some dynamic stuff. So we have a compressor and a multiband compressor. And this just has basic attack, release, ratio, just all the stuff you have in pretty much any standard compressor. It's not super crazy. It also has auto makeup gain. And here you can control the ratio. You'll see that they don't have a limiter, but if you want this to turn into a limiter, just set it to ratio 100 to 1. And it works like a limiter. And one thing I didn't mention is that all of these have presets on them, and you can actually save presets. So if you find a preset from, let's say, another preset pack that you like, you can save that preset. I don't know, comp test. You just give it a name, and then you can go and access that preset again on another patch, for example. Then we have, under dynamics here, we have a multiband compressor, which is pretty similar looking to the Ableton one, where you've got this compression and expansion, this above and below compression and expansion. And you can control the output of the low, medium, mid and high. And then it has this mode, which is, at the moment it's set to above and below. So anything above and below these lines will get expanded or compressed. And if you set it to this, you'll see those bottom ones disappear. And then it's only if the signal goes above this, it'll get compressed. Then you've also got input, attack, and release. And then the amount. So this is, I guess, the dry wet. Okay, and then we have, under modulation, we have a bunch of choruses, or a couple of choruses. We've got a standard chorus, which just has all the standard controls: rate, delay, depth, feedback, and then the number of voices. And then we have a chorus June 6 emulation. So I actually own the standalone plugin for this, and I quite like this chorus. So it's pretty cool that they've included it in here. It's it's really simple to use. You can only really adjust the rate and the depth and the phase. And you can see that visually here. And it's got dry wet. And then we have stereo pan. And this basically just allows us to pan the voices left and right. And you can see it here, it's just kind of swinging left to right. And it's based on essentially an LFO. And you can make it natural or linear. So I guess one's more chaotic than the other. And then it also has this mono bass. So if you wanted to put this stereo pan onto like a bass sound, but you don't want the sub to have stereo information, you can mono the bass and set the cutoff over here. So anything below 100 hertz now will be, or 112 hertz will be mono. Okay, and you can also invert the left and right phase, I guess. Then we've also got phaser, pretty standard phaser with all the usual controls on it. Not going to go super into depth on that. We've got a flanger. Also pretty standard. If you don't know what any of the controls do, I assume that most people would, but if you're still quite new to synthesis, maybe you haven't seen all of them, just remember you can always read what it says down here and it'll tell you exactly what they do. Changes the flanger feedback to subtractive rather than additive. And it's always good to just listen and see what sounds cool rather than going off descriptions. And then this is just a model of BL20 analog flanger or hardware flanger. So yeah, that's pretty cool. And then we got a couple filters. So first, this is this multi-filter, similar to the one that you have on the synth page here, but it just doesn't have as many options. So he has the modes. You've got low pass, high pass, band pass, and two comb filters, feedback and feed forward. Then you can select the slope. Okay, so maybe in combination with this, you do have as many options. Maybe I was wrong. Yeah, you do. Okay, so you can set 3 different slopes on these lows and highs, which is great. And it's also got the resonance. And then we've got a parametric EQ, which is pretty handy. So you can EQ it straight in the synth. And I'm sure everybody's used a parametric EQ. I don't need to explain how they work. Pretty much just click and drag. Alright, so that's pretty much it for all of these FX types. So we've gone over the routing of it. You know that there's 2 inserts now and 1 return. And you know how to change the routing of those. So next up, we're going to look at the really awesome sequencer. All right, let's get into the sequencer. But before we do that, I just want to make a sound that we can quickly work with. Just a basic saw wave kind of pluck. We'll bring down this cutoff filter. Then we'll use envelope 2 to modulate it. Let's just go into the envelopes here and change the shape. And And then we're going to add a little bit of effects here. Let's just give it a bit of delay. Maybe ping pong. Let's make it like eighths. And give it a little bit of feedback. Maybe some reverb. Bring down the dry wet a bit. Just because working with an arpeggiator can get annoying if you don't have a nice sound to work with. Okay, so just something simple. Alright, so when you open up the sequencer, you'll see this panel on the left, and to enable the sequencer you have to turn it on using that button. And now you have options to use an arpeggiator and a sequencer. So the difference between arpeggiator and sequencer is the arpeggiator will arpeggiate a chord that you're playing. So if I open up the keyboard and you see me play a chord, the C major chord, the arpeggiator is going to arpeggiate that chord. It's going to break the chord up into individual notes and play it back to me. The sequencer, on the other hand, you'll see if you have a look at this section, when I choose the sequencer, it has a scale that I can choose, and I can edit the scale. So it's going to basically play back the notes that I choose in the sequencer. So here it's all C, so if I just hold down the note on here, it's just going to play C over and over again. I can shift these around and start adding notes. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the arpeggiator because it's on the left here. And underneath this, you'll see this randomized section. And this randomized section is tied to these little dice blocks that you see over here. And so in the arpeggiator and on the sequencer, you'll see both have all these options for velocity, octave, trig probability, gate length, and slide. And I guess the easiest way to explain it, most noticeable, will be the octave. So if I start playing just the note C here, and we set the second one up 1 octave, we'll now hear that octave playing up. But what we can do is we can add some randomness to this. So if I slide up this this dice button, you'll see that these little gray lines around here get wider and wider. And that's basically the range of randomness. So it's not going to be random every time. The values have been generated and are displayed by these little light blue lines. And now if I wanted to regenerate a new bunch of values, I can use this regen button. And now you'll see these jump around every time. Okay, so it also has auto regen, and I can tell it to automatically regenerate random values. Let's say if we do it every 1 bar, you'll see every 1 bar it's going to regenerate a whole new set of values. Okay, and then it also has this apply function. So if I like these random values that it's given me, maybe I want to actually apply them to the octave function here. So if I click apply, now we have got these bright blue lines have jumped into those positions. And might want to turn off auto regen once we're happy with these values. But you could use this auto regen as a sort of way to introduce some humanness to your track. Let's say if you used it in conjunction with another function like velocity. Let's say we wanted to make this seem like a lot more of a human playing an arpeggio. Each note wouldn't be exactly the same. You could use this auto regen to regenerate every 8th note. So every value is going to be different every time. And if we map this to the velocity to the amp mod, we'll hear it. If we bring up this randomness even more, now you can really hear the effect. So yeah, this could be cool. Let's turn that off and bring this back down. Okay, so on the left here, on the left under rate, you'll see we have swing, so we can add swing to our arpeggio. And this is where we define the speed of it. So let's say we set it to 16ths. We can also set it to dotted or triplets or just BPM synced. Then we have this polyrhythm function. So how we currently define the length of the sequence is by dragging this parameter forwards and back. But what if we want different things to happen polyrhythmically? So to give you an example, maybe we want, I'm just going to reset this parameter. Maybe we want to pitch every third note up. But we can't really do it over here because you'll see that this comes around, we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So it's not going to be every third. So we need to create a polyrhythm. So essentially what we would want to do is drag just this channel down to here so that this 3-note pattern repeats continuously while the other ones go throughout this 8-note pattern. Well, we can do that with polyrhythm. If we turn that on, now you'll see we can drag each one independently and we can achieve exactly what I wanted to achieve there. So now we can bring this down. And now every third note should be pitched up an octave. And you can make the entire polyrhythm reset after a certain number of bars. So let's say after half a bar, I want everything to jump back to position 1. I can do that this way. So you can start getting really interesting rhythms when you start playing with polyrhythms and the realign function here. Okay, so let's move into this window. Here we can see it just says ARP here. And this is under mode, this is where we choose the way it's played. So if we just play a chord like a C major chord, it's playing it up currently, it's playing all these notes in sequence going up and then resetting. We can play it as played, and that'll be, if I land my highest note first, like the G note, and then the middle note and the bottom note, it's going to play it in that order. So you can play it in whatever order you want if you're using keys, or you can choose down, up, down, random, whatever you want. Okay, so you'll see I've already gone through this randomness, so you know how it works. You've got div, which stands for clock divider, and how that works is you can divide certain tracks by fractions. So let's say we want this one to happen half as often as all of these notes. We can divide it by 2. So now it's going to stick on each one of these for 2 notes. You can see it's moving slower. Or we can make it go even slower. And now it never even reaches that because we've got this realign function enabled. So that's the divider. And then we've got this reset function. I briefly showed you it. If I wanted to reset this whole row, and I don't want to go there and drag everything back to 0, then I could just click this button and it would reset it. Okay, and then this is just basically the sequencer, or I don't know what I'd even call this. I guess the actual sequencer itself. So you have 16 note options here, but you don't have to use all of them. And we can drag them independently by enabling this polyrhythm function, or we can drag them all together if we want everything to move together. Right, so that basically explains the arpeggiator. Next up is the sequencer, and I think the sequencer is where I would have the most fun. So here you can start kind of writing melodies and getting the synth to do all the work. You can get super interesting and alive feeling melodies by making use of velocity and octaves and probability, gate length, all of that stuff. And we're going to go through all of them. So we've already gone through random div reset, and you know how this all works, so I'm not going to explain those again. But the main difference here will be in the pitch using the scale function, the transpose. So let's have a look at scale. So at the moment it's set to chromatic, which means it's going to play every single note, all 12 notes in an octave. But we can choose different scales. So let's say I wanted to make something in natural minor. Now what you'll notice is that when I move these notes, it's snapping to that key, to the scale of natural minor. I can't go from C to C sharp, it just snaps to D, and then to D sharp, the third, and then up to F, G, and so on. So we can sit here and write a melody and know that it's always going to be in key. It's quantized to our minor scale. And don't think of C as C, because it could also be A. Think of this bottom one as your, I guess they probably should have numbered it rather. Maybe 1, 2, 3, it would have made more sense, because it's actually really just your root note. So if I play an A, it's playing all A's, it's not playing C's. If I play like a C, D sharp, that's going to be the minor third. If I played at an A, it's still playing the minor third. So it basically transposes it to whatever key you're pressing. So yeah, we can write a nice little melody here just to test this out. I like that. Okay, and now we can also transpose using this, so we can move it up. Maybe you want to move it down an octave. This will be a quick way to do that. Or up an octave. Okay, and that's really the only difference between the sequencer and the arpeggiator. And now just to like kind of show it to you, I think it'll be fun to sit and write a little bit of a polyrhythm using this and showing you how you can make this interesting. So I'm going to turn on polyrhythms, and let's use this velocity function and generate some random values for it. Say let's bring it up to like 36%. Let's bring it up even higher, and let's just regenerate them. Okay, I think I like that. And let's make that polyrhythmic too, so it's just going to be a bit more random. And let's use this octave function to, every once in a while it's going to maybe pitch down an octave. Let's do it on, let's say on 5 here. And let's make this polyrhythmic too, so it's going to reset in a weird position, and it's never going to be, it's not always going to be this position 5 this is going to happen on, because it's not synced, it's polyrhythmic. But we have it on realigned, so it is resetting, so let's turn that off. Okay, let's try and make it a bit groovier. Let's transpose it back down a bit. Okay, so the trig probability, that can be interesting, but I find sometimes it just sounds like the synth is fucking up. So I tend to like either have it on 0 or 100%. I don't like it when notes just randomly don't play. So like you could create a bouncy rhythm like this, for example. And just to show you what probability would sound like. I guess it sounds kind of cool if it has like a background element, but it's quite unpredictable, so it can, sometimes it sounds cool and sometimes it doesn't. And then we have gate length, which is pretty fun. So gate length basically tells the node when to cut off the MIDI note. So if we bring this up, a few of these up, you'll see some of the notes are longer, some can be shorter. Okay, and then we also have the slide function here. So the slide will basically just glide between notes, and this is percentage is basically how long it takes for that to happen. And I find in small amounts this sounds good, not in huge amounts. Okay, and another thing to note is that on this keyboard there's this little hold feature, and that can be fun to use with Arpeggiator, because sometimes when you arpeggiate something you don't want to sit there and hold down a chord, you just want to play it once. So if I hit hold and I just tap a chord on my keyboard, it's going to keep playing this infinitely until I turn hold back off. So that's just something to note. Okay, so yeah, sequence is super powerful and super fun on this. And next up, we're going to be getting into the whole modulation section, all these modulation sources, and then we'll just work our way down the synth. Hope you enjoyed that, and let's move on. Okay, so we're going to be doing the modulation sources now, and we're also going to be going through this panel and the macros. So let's start over here on the left. Well, first let me explain how modulation works. So there's different ways to modulate parameters, and almost anything can be modulated, and you can have quite a few modulation sources applied to any parameter. So if I hover over parameter, like let's quickly make this a saw wave so that we can actually hear the effect a filter has. If I play a note and bring this down, let's say I want to modulate the cutoff filter. I can do that by hovering over and clicking on this plus button, and that opens up this window. And now you'll see each one of these has a value of 0. So let's say I wanted to assign or modulate the cutoff using an envelope. Here are our envelopes, and I can just click and drag this up to, let's say, use envelope 2 to modulate that. So now envelope 2 is modulating that, and you can see envelopes here. Here's envelope 2. We can adjust the decay and all of that, and we can hear it working. To get out of this window, you can just click away, or you can click that little cross. But that's not the only way you can modulate here. Another way is to click on the actual name of whatever source you're using here. So in this case, envelope 2, if I click on that, this window pops open. And now we can see what's being used to modulate the cutoff. So at the moment, now we can see the destination, sorry. So the destination here, it says filter 1 cutoff. And we can go through and use this to quickly assign many different parameters to it. So let's say I wanted to Also assign the resonance and maybe, I don't know, the wavetable position, maybe the volume. Now you can see each time I click on one of these rings and move a parameter, it adds a new column over here with the name, and we have some values over here. And we can delete these by just clicking the cross, or you can just bypass them by clicking the on-off button. So in here you'll see there's two values. So this is just the amount, and it goes from -1 up to 1. And it's got another one called sidechain. And how you can think of sidechain is, it's a bit of a confusing word to use because most of the producer community, when they hear the word sidechain, they think of a sidechain compressor. But this is completely different. This is essentially, we can use another source to control the amount of this filter one cutoff, for example. I think the easier way for me to explain it is just to show you. So let's say we set this to macro 1. Now what's going to happen is if I set this to the value of 1, we're not going to hear really any movement in this filter. Let me just bypass that. We're not going to, yeah, so you can see the filter's not moving at all. But if I turn up macro 1, we begin to hear it. And a way to understand this is, if you used Serum before, you'll be aware of a feature called the aux source. If I just open up Serum here, let me just show you in a new window. In Serum, you have this matrix here, and let's say you wanted to map an envelope here to the filter cutoff. Similar to what we're doing over here. You also have this function here called aux source, and if I map that to macro 1, we also wouldn't hear that unless we turned that up. So it's basically the same thing as that. So just think of this as a way to dynamically control the amount of the modulation source. And here you can use many different things. I'm not going to go through all of them, but yeah. Okay. So that just basically covers how to modulate stuff. So now we're going to go through all the different types of modulators and what they do. So first up we got Velo, which stands for velocity. And that's just basically how hard you push the key on your keyboard. You can map that to things like, we've done this before with amp mod. So if I now play quietly, sorry, let me just on this channel. Quiet, I press this, or the softer I push my key, the softer the synth is going to be. So that's velocity, and then under velocity you can adjust the velocity curve, I believe. Yeah, here we go, velocity curve. So you can make it linear like this or exponential. So the quieter ones won't have such a huge range, but if I hit it hard, it kind of jumps around a lot more. And you can also adjust the curves of aftertouch, and if you don't have a keyboard that does aftertouch, doesn't really apply to you. And if you don't know what aftertouch is, I'm not really going to explain it. You can just Google it. You can also adjust the keyboard curve, key tracking curve. Okay, you can see I don't have aftertouch, so I think that's why this is not really enabled, or I'm not sure why I can't edit that. So here you can also assign the mod wheel to different stuff. I think everybody knows what a mod wheel is. Here we have keyboard tracking and MIDI expression. So these are all just basically MIDI. All the pink stuff is all the keyboard stuff, all the MIDI stuff. Okay, then we get into envelopes, and I think everybody should probably know what an envelope is. Like I said, if you've gotten this far without knowing what an envelope is, you probably should have already learned a bit more about basic synthesis. But these are just your envelopes, and there's nothing really unique about these envelopes. I don't think I need to go over all the different parameters, but just know that they have this function here called ADR, and what that does is turns this envelope from a 4-stage envelope, from having attack, decay, sustain, and release to just attack, decay, and release. So it'll just skip that sustain phase and go straight to the release phase. And this is the VCA envelope, the first one, so that controls the amp, the volume. And then these two you can just use as modulation sources, but you can also use this one as a modulation source. And then they also have gate sources, so you can have them being, at the moment they being re-triggered by key presses, but you can have them being triggered by randoms or LFOs or whatever you wanted. Okay, then the LFOs, these are pretty straightforward LFOs. You can change the waveform. One thing you might wonder is, how do you get a saw wave out of this? And the way you do that is using the symmetry function. So if I turn this up to a triangle and then adjust the symmetry, I can turn it into a saw wave. So yeah, we can change the waveform. We can adjust the rate in hertz, or sync it dotted or triplets. We can adjust the phase of it, and we can also use fade. And fade is quite useful. Basically, it'll tell the LFO to take, for example, 3.19 seconds to reach its maximum amplitude. So if you wanted to have like I don't know, vibrato kind of effect. So let's just map this to the fine tuning. LFO2. Now you can hear it pitching up and down. Following that, let's speed it up. So now if I play this with the fade at 0, you immediately hear the effect of the LFO. If I wanted to fade in, let's say over 5 seconds, the initial key press, there'll be no pitching, but then it'll slowly fade in. And that's kind of more natural way to create vibrato, because if you think about a player, like a guitar player, they'll pluck the string and then they'll start to move their finger. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty much it. You can also choose the way it gets re-triggered. The moment it gets re-triggered by my key presses, but we can also have it free running so it never gets re-triggered. And then you can also make it bipolar or unipolar, meaning that at the moment it's going positive and negative. So you can see it's going from left to right, above and below this point. But if I make it unipolar, it's only going above. Okay, so that covers the LFOs. Then we have functions. So a good way to understand functions is if you've used Serum, you'll know that the LFOs in Serum, you can click and draw any shape you want, whereas with these ones, you can't click and add points and draw shapes. You can only adjust the waveform over here and the symmetry. So a function is essentially like the Serum LFO, where you can click and add points and draw shapes. You also have draw mode, so you can draw like points like this or the reverse of those. You can also draw flat points or just manually draw things. And you also have a bipolar or unipolar function here. Here's how you set the rate, the speed of it. You can also set it to play once. So if let's just assign this to something else. I'm going to come here and just delete that. Let's assign this to the filter, because that'll be a good way to, oh, there's me trying to drag it. We can actually click on this function here to do that. We're using function 1, so function 1. So let's assign this to the filter cutoff here. So there we go. Now you can see it runs through this, and we're hearing the effect of the filter, but it's only playing through once, and then it reaches the end. And you can control that using a gate source. So if you were using like a sequencer or something, maybe you wanted to have this reset every time you start the sequence, then you could do that. Then it's got a loop function, and essentially this is now an LFO with many fancy points. You can save presets, so if you have a shape that you like to use and it's super complex, you don't want to draw it every time, you can save it as a preset. And then magnetize is basically just a snap function, so if I turn it off, let's just delete a point here. You can right click to delete points, by the way. You can see this doesn't snap to these vertices. If I turn it on, it starts to snap to them. And then the scale would just basically turn up the amount of this LFO. You can see exactly what it's doing. You can also reverse it or mirror it. And then you can also select the points manually by, I don't know why you'd ever want to do this instead of just clicking, but you can. And you can also adjust them using these parameters. But also, again, I don't really get why you'd want to manually use those. And then you can randomize everything. So if I click and drag this around, it'll drag them in a random fashion. And then you can watch that dice gets full, and then as I let go, it empties. So it basically resets every time, and I'm going to get a different random value every time I drag this up. Okay, so that's how functions work. Next one is random, and random is pretty cool. Let me just go in and remove this cutoff here. And let's go to random 1, and we're going to assign that to the cutoff again. So there's different types of random generators. The first one's called Turing, and this is just like a continuous cycle of random values that play based on the rate and the length that you set. And you can also use this flip function to, it basically will reverse the way I understand it. It's not, this description isn't very good. It says at 0 it never changes, at 50% it's fully random. Well, I've set it to 0 and it looks like it's still changing. But the way I understand it is at 100% it'll start to mirror these values, where at 0 it won't. Although it's hard to see exactly what it's doing. The manual described it somewhat the way I just described it, but you might want to read it yourself to get a better understanding. So you can change the length of each one of these, and then you can also change the rate. So if we want it super fast, we can do that. Sorry, the length controls the length of the sequence. But as it's random, it never really is a sequence, so I don't really get that. You can control how this sequence will reset using the usual controls. Okay, and then the next one is called sample and hold. So these, we've just got 3 of the same, essentially the same random generators, but they've laid them out in a way that all 3 random types are spread out over the 3 of them. But I'm just going to be looking at random 1 for now. So sample and hold is basically when because it's set to keyboard, every time I hit the key on my keyboard, it's going to generate a random value and then hold that value until I hit a new one. And each time we're going to get a different value, different random value. And you can also use random sample and hold sources. well, not random, sorry, you can just use different sample and hold sources. At the moment it's set to white noise, but you can control it using a bunch of different other things like macros. You can see if I hit this, set this to 0, we're not really getting anything out of the sample and hold. As I turn it up, we do. Okay, and then, so you have this value here, which is going to basically fade it. Oh, let me just turn this off. Oh, set it to white noise again. So there you go. Now we've got a bit more of a smooth fade every time the value goes up, and then we can also smooth it out every time we go down, or we can link them and then just control them together. Okay, and then we also have binary, which is either +1 or either positive or, well, you know what binary is, 1 or 0. So it's not like it's going to generate random values between 1 and 0. It's either going to be 1 or 0. And the probability controls that. So the probability that it's going to be 1 is now 100% chance, and probability that's going to be 0 is now 0%. If I set it back to the middle, 50% of the time it's going to be positive, 50% of the time it's going to be negative. And then the coral basically controls the probability that it's going to stay on that value. So if we set this high, it should just stay now at 0 permanently. Bring it back down, it'll eventually jump back. Then we can also reset these using the normal triggers that we have on everything else. And you can speed it up or slow it down, the rate. Okay, and then the final modulation source is Combinate. And so Combinate is a way to essentially combine different other sources together. So we could combine like 2 LFOs and use different types of mathematical equations to combine them. So as an example, let's just remove the modulation here on the cutoff, and let's take LFO 1 and let's assign that to the filter cutoff. Let's just bring that down here. Let's speed it up so we can hear it. Let's just go into this envelope section and remove the filter cutoff. Okay, so now we can hear that LFO. Let's go back into Combinate. And let's first take LFO 2, and we're just going to change the shape and speed it up quite a lot. Let's bring the symmetry down here and make it more of a saw wave. This way it's a lot easier to understand Combinate. Okay, so let's go back to Combinate, and what I'm going to do is select plus for sum, and then the source is going to be LFO 1. So now we can see LFO 1 is in here, and we are going to add LFO 2 to LFO 1. And we don't see anything yet, but as I increase the amount, you should start seeing the LFO 2 kind of blending together with LFO 1. So now you can see this like cool little spiky shape. That's LFO 2 kind of being added to LFO 1. And if I play it and start fading it in, you'll hear the effect. Oh, sorry, I need to map the combinator to the filter, not the LFO. So let's just go back in here and delete that, and go back to Combinate, and we'll assign this here. And then bring up this amount. So now you can hear that effect. So it's a way to create like more interesting LFOs just using mathematical functions. You can also do, say, difference. So what this is going to do is exactly the inverse of what we've just done. So now you'll see that shape is now reversed. You can multiply it, which gives you a super crazy shape. Divide. Crossfade. So I think essentially this add is quite similar to add, but we can eventually only crossfade to the first or the second LFO. So now we're just hearing the second LFO. We have lag, and lag basically just smooths out one of the sources. So let's look at LFO 2, because that's a very sharp source. If I start to do this, it's going to kind of smooth it out. Eventually, I think it'll just turn into a flat line, pretty much. Threshold, so you can define the threshold and it won't move below that threshold. Until eventually it's just a solid line. Offset basically will offset the DC value. So the center of this, sorry, this is actually hurting my eyes. The center of this will essentially move up. And it'll also reduce the amplitude while it's doing that. So eventually it's just a line. And then remap, you can like kind of draw a shape. And let's say I draw this weird shape over here. It's going to kind of add that shape into this. You can see them kind of combining together. Okay. So yeah, that's Combinate. Macros. I mean, macros are really easy to understand if you've ever used any other synth. They work exactly the same way. You assign the macros by clicking on something. So let's do resonance. And now we can just type in a name here, call it res. And then as we turn this up, the resonance goes up. And then obviously you can assign, the whole point of a macro is to assign multiple values, and it makes things easier to control. Okay, so that pretty much covers everything in the synth. There's a few little controls over here. Here we've got an undo macro, an undo button. Here we can also show the history so we can see what's been done, and I think you can just jump to different steps if you want to. And you can also go forward in time if you do decide to jump back. And then this is just showing CPU usage. It's got a panic switch too. So if your synth freaks out and starts making weird sounds and the devil comes out of it, hit the panic button and it'll stop all the sounds. Here you can see the combinator stops. Okay, so that's it. Hope you enjoyed that and you learned a lot. I know before I did this exercise, I owned Pigments for quite a few months and just never used it because I didn't really understand it. But going through the entire manual and teaching it to you guys, I feel like I now know it as well as any other synth I use. So I'm going to be using it a ton and especially love this sequencer on it. I think it's going to spark some really cool ideas. So yeah, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next tutorial.